Look, up in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane. No. Yeah, it's a bird. It's the Quirky Bird Show with your host, Robin Savage.
I guess you're live.
Okay, that was really weird. What happened to all the music behind it?
I don't know. That is bizarre. That's maybe our new technology.
It knocked out all the music.
It doesn't make any sense, like even slightly.
It was a little anticlimactic, I have to say, without the music.
That's true.
It was.
I'm gonna have to. Let's see. As we're being improvisational. I'm so sorry, Robin.
That's okay. That's okay. Oh, there we go.
We'll start over again.
Look, up in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane. No, it is a bird. It's the Quirky Bird Show with your host, Robin Savage.
Alrighty, welcome to the Quirky Bird Show here on the artsradio.com, where we talk about all things quirky in the world of the comedic arts. As you guys can see, I have two gentlemen on each side of me, a Michael sandwich, if you will. I have Mike Morris and Michael Freed, who are not only being mics, but you guys are actually being very quiet today.
We're mics in stereo.
Exactly.
Hey, you are. Well, I always have a topic on the Quirky Bird Show, and my topic today is about starting out in comedy. And I asked both of these guys, because they're both fairly new to comedy, and I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about what it is to start out in comedy, and where you are now, your goals, your aspirations. We're going to get to know the mics in here. As always, I start out with the quirky question of the day. I kind of throw out a question and ask people to share their thoughts. Today, my quirky question was, if I can find it, basically, I was just asking comedians who've kind of been in the business for a little bit what their best advice was. And see, this is what it's called to be super prepared. It's all right there, and I can't find it. You know what it is? It's the Facebook timeline.
It's always the last place you look.
It's really always it is. It's always in the question. Okay, here we go. You know what? Since you guys are my guests, I'm going to ask you this. What's the best comedy advice you've gotten thus far in your comedy career, Michael Freed?
I think the one that I hear over and over and over again that really rings true to me is just to get as much stage time as you possibly can. Go to every open mic you can and just get up over and over and over again. But I'd kind of like to add to that because in my experience, what I found is just getting that stage time isn't enough. You want to get there early and socialize with the other comedians, and you want to stay late and socialize with the other comedians because those features who are there practicing their sets are the ones that are going to be able to get you the guest spots in the future. And you really want to get to know them and on a personal level and to where they're willing to do favors for you.
What kind of favors, Michael? No, but
what do you got?
You're right. I mean, the features help get the guest spots, and then as everyone kind of progresses, the features become the headliners. So I understand that logic. Now, you Mike Morris, how long have you been in comedy?
I'm just over 5 months.
Okay.
Almost 6.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. And you are hammering it out. I see you everywhere a lot.
Doing what I can.
What thus far has been the best advice that you've been given?
The best advice I got, and this is a name drop if there ever was one, is Doug Stanhope. Because whenever I see a comedian, the first thing I ask after the show is, what advice can you give me other than don't do it? Because that was the most common answer from comedians, don't do it. But the best advice I got was actually from Doug Stanhope. And he said, don't follow advice. He goes, anybody that gives you advice is going to tell you how to do comedy their way, not your way. He then added that he said if I'd been able to talk to Dane Cook, I would have told him to drink a bottle of Drano because he's not funny. And he said just have fun with it. And so I thought that was just the best advice, and it's kind of stuck with me.
Okay, very good. Sort of saying, best advice is no advice.
Yeah,
okay.
Just do what you can. Do it your own way,
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean that's a part of it. It's an art. I just want to read some of the answers that I've gotten for the quirky question of the day. I always like to give a shout out. Krishna Reddy. I know you guys know Krishna. He's a local Tampa comic. He plays Side Splitters quite a bit. Very funny young man. He says when starting out, don't get too attached to your material. No professional uses bits from when they first started. Also, he says don't blame the audience for bad sets. See what you can do better. Some crowds aren't as good as others, but you have to eventually win over the crowd. Krishna also added, don't actually get into it.
See, there you go.
I think he said it. He said, "Don't do effing stand up." I should have listened to that one. That was his direct quote. My good friend, Long Island Mary, she said, "Be true to yourself." Advice came from Jim Wiggins, the last hippie of America. Follow your voice, and it will flow. And my good friend Suzanne, Willette, she said, watch and learn. And then just a couple other people, Steve Eric, who's been doing it, and Steve Baird, who've both been doing it over 25 years. Steve Eric's advice was be funny, and Steve Baird's was don't quit your day job.
Yes.
Now, Steve Eric, I actually spoke with the guest spot that I did where he was headlining, and Steve gave me really great advice. And it's, the first thing you want to do when you get on stage is get the audience on your side, because you can win or lose the audience in the first 30 seconds of your set. And if you lose them, it's really hard to get them back. You don't want to get up there and be abusive to your audience because
maybe the teacher was. Someone told me one time that, okay. Actually, I have one more person who wants to answer the question. Our good friend Nolan Ray, the power and the brains behind.
I was hoping we would smooth right into that transition.
Very silky.
I actually was going to answer it on Facebook, but I'm just really busy, as you know. Anyway, when I first started doing stand-up, Ron Hortman, Ron Hortman?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Ron.
My dad's really good friends with his family, so he came up to me to help me write a few of my jokes and so on and so forth. And he said, if you act like an open micer, you'll be treated like an open micer. And I didn't really understand what that, and he didn't explain it to me. That's all he said. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to watch the open micers and not act like them. So then once I got there, I see most of the open micers going out smoking, not watching the other sets, leaving as soon as their set was over, not doing the opposite of what these guys are saying. And I just did the opposite. I hung out as long as I could. I talked to as many people as I could. I got as many connections as I could. So I didn't act like the open micers. And what he also meant by that was change your set as often as you can, your 5-minute set. Because, you can go to Jack's Joint over here with the open mic every Thursdays, or what is it, Wednesdays now? I don't know.
Thursdays.
I was trying to do a clever plug, but I messed it up. Anyway, and, my material, I got so busy here all the time, I wasn't writing new material. I wasn't doing anything. So I just quit going to the open mics because they don't want to hear the same jokes for a whole year, every single, and I see some open micers that are doing that. It's the same exact jokes that when I first started 2 years ago, it's exactly the same set. And I mean, that's great for them. That's great. I mean, but that's not something that I think someone who's going to, to answer your question. So I guess the piece of advice was if you're, that's what it is. So
yeah,
anyway,
I like that answer.
Don't act if you act like an open micer, you'll be treated like one. So Larry, as you see, Larry never treated me like an open micer because I never acted like one. I was always there doing everything. Same thing over with Bob Burr and everything else. So.
Yeah, you go above and beyond.
Yeah, right. Why not? Plus, anyway, I'll be in here if you need me.
That actually.
Sounds like he's going to the bathroom. I'll be in my office.
If any veteran, I say veterans, I mean just any other comedians out there who've been doing
comedy,
who've been doing comedy. You don't have to be a nom or anything. Who want to contribute to this? It's 727-597-4022. Now someone brought up a really good point. He said, don't do the same material. And I have to tell you, sometimes, and I've been in comedy 6 years, and sometimes you're tempted to. Like, I saw you both at the open mic at Side Splitters, and I did basically all newer material, and I started tanking, and part of me was thinking, I'm just going to go to my old material because I know I can get the laughs, but then I'm thinking, I'm not here to impress. I'm here to try to iron out the bugs and see why this material's not going. So I find that, I don't know, as you guys get more material, are you finding that you kind of want to rely on your reliable stuff, or?
It depends on where I'm at. Mike and I just had this conversation last night. I feel like there's a lot more pressure on the rookies to come with your best material at an open mic, especially someplace that is a comedy club like the Improv or Side Splitters, because you're really trying to get that attention. Whereas, if I go someplace like a coffee shop, I'm more willing to do some new material because there's not as much pressure to perform.
Okay.
I try to focus a lot on writing. I want to try and become like just an output for jokes, and so I try to work on my writing as often as possible. But I take advice that I've heard from I believe that it was Steve Barrett. I may be misquoting him. That was saying that you kind of sandwich it in there. Sometimes you'll have a good bit that starts it off, and then the ones you're questioning or a newer bit might go in the middle, so that if it doesn't work, you can still roll over it with another reliable joke. And I think there's a real benefit to honing the material. So you may hear the jokes over and over, but that's the way to hone it. But also, for me, I want to mix it up because I get bored of saying the same thing over and over and over again. I mean, if the people at Jack's Joint or anywhere else I go are tired of hearing it, trust me, I'm tired of saying it too. And there's a certain point, like recently, where I was getting discouraged because you kind of have to believe in the joke. And if you say it so many times, it just becomes like a garble of words. It no longer is a funny thing to say. Now it's just reciting a poem, like da 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 da.
Yeah. You just go through the motions.
And I'm being generous by saying there's a ha 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 at the end. Because a lot of open mics there are not.
I actually felt a huge relief when I started doing the 5-minute sets at the comedy clubs, because there was so much pressure to come up with a new 15-minute set week after week after week. That's a lot of writing.
Yeah. Because we're involved with something called Smart Comedy Support Group, where it's I don't even want to call it underground comedy. It's just sort of a different sort of comedy that we're trying to do, but it's more, I guess, socially based comedy. And there is a difference between doing coffee shop comedy and then doing the comedy club comedy, because it's more quick and it's more timely.
Absolutely. I find it's a lot easier to rotate your sets when you're only doing a 5-minute set. It's a lot easier to rotate your jokes so then it's not getting stale.
Exactly.
When you're doing a shorter set.
Exactly. I remember one of the bits that I do that always seems to work really well is a bit called about the discount store Aldi's. And when I first wrote that bit, Aldi's it didn't even exist in Florida. So no one knew it, and I would do that bit and no one would ever laugh. I'm like, it's really funny. And I would just keep on it. And then I remember one time I was at Jack's Joint when it was just the regular coconuts, and there was a bunch of people there from Chicago, and because they had Aldi's in the Midwest, and it tore up. And so I kept that joke, and then eventually Aldi's moved to Florida. So that joke was always stationary, and eventually like the situation came to the joke. So I mean, I don't know. Has that happened to you guys? Have you found a joke and just worked with it, and it finally got to be there?
I think I wrote a joke about racial profiling several months ago, and it didn't really work with any of my other material, but I knew it was funny, and I just kind of held on to it. And recently, with the Smart Comedy Group, we did a topic on hate, so I kind of brought that back out of the closet and did an entire set. On that topic, and it works really well.
Have you seen what the new topic is?
I have. I want to kill her.
You at least have a joke now.
I've already used that one.
How about you, Michael? Have you had a joke that you really sort of put a lot of TLC love and care try to get that joke out the door?
I kind of try to do that with all my jokes. I don't have that much material to roll back on, and I keep trying to write ideas. I think when you talk about making a joke that's about something that's you have to relate the material to it. So if it's an Aldi's store, then you either can like make it change the reference to no longer Aldi's. I don't know what that is. It sounds like an outlet store, so maybe you could change it to like a Big Lots or a local chain that probably has the same relatable material. Or it could just be something like I hear comics on podcasts talking about how like jokes in America won't hit the same in Europe. Because they don't have the same references, and it's because I think comedy it's all about making a point of reference, either an observation or something a shared experience. And if so, that experience doesn't exist, you either have to create it or make it like another one. You know? So again, like with Aldi's, I know if you did something like a Jack in the Box versus a Carl's Jr. kind of thing, where I know of it, but I've never been to either one of them.
Yeah,
but I can still relate it.
it's a horrible grocery store that I get most of my groceries at.
Yeah, well, so that'd be like a Save a Lot or even a Big Lots in some ways. So
Yeah.
and you can relate that. There's probably going to be it depends on how specific it is, but it probably has an idea that relates to something else, because there's going to be a bad grocery store everywhere you go. Because someone's going to be able to not have enough money to get groceries at the good store, air quotes.
Now, I have a question for both of you. And what got you guys into stand-up? Because stand-up seems like a really fun, easy thing when you're watching it on the television. But once you get up on it, you realize, oh my gosh, it's so hard. What got you into stand-up initially?
I think I got into stand-up for the same reason that all single guys do anything, is to meet women. And I've been sorely disappointed that the quality of groupies for comedy is not the same as the quality of groupies for like a musician.
No.
Speak for yourself, sir.
Mike's got other stories.
Yeah.
Oh, I've got stories.
Oh, he's got stories. Yeah, I've heard them secondhand.
But no, once I started doing it, I loved it. I just love making people laugh. It's so much fun. And once I've gotten into the community, especially recently, and started to get to know a lot of the other comics and started to hang out with them. And when you're doing open mics 4 nights a week, that kind of becomes your social life.
Absolutely.
And being able to socialize with the other comics, I mean, you're hanging out with the funniest people in Tampa Bay on a night after night after night, and there is never a dull moment.
Absolutely. They're that truly, and the longer you're in comedy, there's truly never ever a dull moment. It's not like, oh, I went to the open mic again. You know?
If you're just going and performing and leaving, you are missing out on the experience.
Now, Mike, how about you? What got you into comedy?
Strangely enough, but the push was from a friend that was telling me that, he goes, I've been listening to comedy on the radio, and you're funnier than most people that are there on like satellite radio. And I thought that's a beaming compliment because I think most of my friends are funnier than me. I've just always tried to make people laugh. I mean, I've heard that from my family. I've always kind of goofed around. Everybody in my family is kind of an extrovert. I'm kind of the shy one in the family. And usually when I tell people that, they're like, what? It's like, you have no idea. And so I've always tried to make people laugh. I've always seeked comedy. I was a comedy nerd before I even knew there was such a thing. Mm-hmm. And but the initial push was a friend saying, you should try it. And I was like, all right, I'll try it. And so I started writing down everything I thought was funny. I put together some jokes, and then it was New Year's Eve that I went to a friend's house. He said, hey, you going to do that comedy thing like you want to? I go, yeah, let me try out 5 minutes. And so I just tried out 5 minutes. They laughed.
So you did your first comedy in front of just like a house party?
My friends, yeah, exactly.
Wow.
So it's a little more generous because they're going to want to laugh to make me feel better, but then it also kind of gives that first kind of jump into it. And it made it a lot easier when I did my first. And I waited 4 more months before I actually did the first open mic. And when I did that, it made a big difference. And
now, did you get laughs at your first open mic?
I did actually. I remember Krishna complimenting on a joke when I made it the first night. And he's been really helpful and giving me advice along the way. What he put on there is exactly what he's told me. So I know he's got that scripted at least. But I just got caught the rush. I was like, oh, once you get that first laugh, it's just like heroin. You just gotta go back.
I've said that before.
But just like heroin, it can be like train spotting too, and then you feel like you're digging through that toilet scene.
Now, Michael, what was your first time on stage like?
Actually, Krishna was also at my first time on stage, coincidentally.
Krishna, if you're
I had
listening,
a completely different
in.
reaction. He called me a loser, but
That sounds about right.
And several times since then.
Yeah.
My first time was horrible. It was I didn't quite know how to write a joke, and I just kind of got on stage and I told some stories that were funny, and my friends always laugh at them, and I thought they were great. But when you're giving a 2-minute setup for a really weak punchline, I found out later that's a bad idea.
Yeah. That's right.
But I was so traumatized from my first time on stage that it took me like 6 weeks to get back up again and try it.
Yeah, my first time, not only did I not get a laugh, I don't think anyone really knew what I was talking, because I didn't come with jokes. I thought of this funny scenario about like what would happen if you went on the Oprah show and like I did this whole thing about I'm going to be on Oprah, but I never said like what I was going to be in the show about. And I talked about like hugging Oprah and I would like heal someone, but I would never. And it was a really weird premise, and everyone was like. I didn't have a punchline,
Right.
and my whole like 3 to 4 minutes because I think they gave me the light after 3. Like, what is she doing? But you're right. I mean, even when you're bombing, and I felt terrible. I don't even think I slept that night. I felt horrible.
Oh man.
But even when you're bombing, there's a rush to it. It's something.
It is. It's something.
It was something.
And then when you get like
an
your first
experience.
laugh, when you get your
when
first
your first
laugh.
laugh, that's great. But then when you don't, it's again it goes down to like jumping out of an airplane. That rush of like free falling, and you're like, oh great, and you get that laugh. That's the chute opening, and if you don't get the laugh, that's like Roadrunner style, like Wile E. Coyote just hitting the ground.
Oh, okay. We have a caller on the line. You are on. Hey, who's this?
Hello.
Hello. Welcome
This
to
is Steve Baird.
the Quirky Bird Show. Oh, Steve Baird, thank you so much for calling in, my friend. Have
No problem.
you have been doing comedy for 25 years, correct?
28, but who's counting?
Now, this show today is all about newcomers. Now, what kind of advice, Steve Baird, would you give for folks just starting out in comedy?
Well, I'll tell you what, one of the first people I got to meet before they made it big was Jay Leno.
Oh,
I
okay.
actually met Jay Leno. A friend of mine was emceeing for him, and they were friends. And so after the show, I went back to the green room and talked with him for a little while. And I remember I asked him the advice. I go, so I've only been doing this 7 months. What's your advice? What should I do? He goes, well, I'll tell you right now, if you write some good jokes, they get stolen by the comics. So you got to write more than they can steal. You can only take a cup out of the well. So I always remembered that. It's kind of like my biblical quote. So I just constantly wrote when I was on the road, and that was the biggest advice I got from the biggest person.
That brings up a very good point because it's a whole big thing in comedy where they talk about stealing jokes or what do they call it, parallel thinking, because there's a lot of material out there and a lot of people have the same spin on the material. But you, Steve, you write an awful lot. You have lots of material.
Yeah, but that's from years ago. I don't write as much as I used to. I'm still writing, but I don't have the time like I used to. When you got more time when you're traveling on the road. So now I got a regular job and doing this, and still squeezing in the writing at night here and there. But I stay pretty busy for an old man.
You do. Now I had you on earlier because I don't know, maybe a month ago, because we were talking about joke writing. Do you have any advice, even for anyone listening who wants to learn about writing jokes? Because Michael and I were just talking. I didn't know how to really truly write a joke, and so it was painful for everyone involved my first time on stage.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. Sometimes I'll start with a punchline and work backwards.
I've done that.
And sometimes I'll see something that's just funny and try it, or I'll think of something funny and record it. That's the thing, best bet's to always carry a tape recorder with you or some kind of recording device, because you never think of something funny and something will make you laugh, and if you don't get it recorded somehow immediately, it's going to be gone, because what that is it's an electrical synapse jumping from one part of your brain to another, and it's only going to last a split second, so you better get it recorded while you can. And then once you got it recorded, then you can mess with it. But
that
I don't know how many times I've thought about, oh, that's a great joke. And then the next 5-10 minutes later, I go, oh, what was it? Darn it.
Oh, I've done that too.
It's gone.
I can't tell you how many times I'm in a conversation with somebody and like, oh my God, that would be an amazing joke. And I need to remember to write that down later. And an hour later, I have no idea what the hell we were talking about.
That's right, Mike. You got to, you can get that. Download an app on the phone that turns it into a tape recorder, so that's what I'd recommend. When I was a kid, we didn't have that kind of thing. I had to have a regular tape recorder.
No, I actually have a question for you and Robin along the lines of stealing jokes and writing. If you're in a conversation or having a conversation with another comic, and it's a really funny conversation, and you think to yourself, this is going to be a really great bit, who owns that material? I mean, it's
Whoever
kind of
does
like
it first on stage.
and this has come up a
Whoever's
couple of
the
times
first
for me.
one, unless you both agree on it, and you agree it's funny, then, maybe you can work something out. I don't know. But
I think you can
generally
actually,
speaking, if you're talking and somebody goes up and does it, and they're the first one to do it, they didn't ask because it wasn't really yours, and it wasn't really his, I'd say the first one on stage to do it claims it.
Okay, so whoever gets first dibs, it's theirs.
I guess.
That's the way, yeah.
I think that
So you just got to jump on them before they do.
Yeah, I think you can actually get a different joke from the same situation, unless you're using a line that one of the people said in the conversation. I think there's a way you can take whatever idea you're playing with and make your own joke that way. Kind of take a new perspective. I mean, because
Exactly.
two people can look at an eclipse and see a totally different event, or even get a different idea of when they look at it. So when it happens, as long as you're not, it's not like you're drawing both the same eclipse. You're looking at something different.
You're right.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen a couple of instances where it's out and out stealing. In fact, I was at a open mic in Orlando, and I actually thought there was going to be a fist fight. And then when I went home and Googled who they were saying that this open micer was stealing the material, it was word for word. And that I disagree with. I mean, I think that's horrible. You shouldn't do that. But I think sometimes people get a little too, I don't know, sensitive or bogged down on the details of, I guess, parallel thinking. And I agree with Steve. I mean, there's, just keep writing and writing and writing. They can't steal your brain. They can't steal all of your material.
Mike had a good point. You can be inspired by the same situation and come up with two completely different jokes. I mean, I listen to 24/7 comedy radio all day long, and I'm frequently inspired by something that another comic says, and I'll write it out. And you would never know that it was inspired by the same joke, because by the time I'm done with it, it's so different.
Mm-hmm.
Right. There's only, you can use as many premises as you want, I got, my premises are basic. Everybody does, but it's just the way you do them. I mean, the jokes that go with the premises. So that's, and if you can come up with a premise somebody's come up with, that's even better.
Yeah.
So
I think that I understand that when you put so much passion behind writing and what you're doing, that you really defend it. But I thought about the fact that, how long is a joke really going to be? They can't steal a chunk of material. They're going to steal a joke at a time. And what's that, 30 seconds,
right.
a minute? Like, you're going to fight or have that much energy wasted over a minute of your life that you can't just recreate? Going back to
exactly.
what
that's
Steve
why
said.
you're right all the time.
You're right.
Yeah.
You just make it so they can't, so what if it is? It's a drop in the bucket compared to what else? And even then, if they start stealing your jokes, eventually they're going to start sounding like you, and which is kind of a backhanded compliment. They're like, well, I guess I'm that funny that someone wants to steal my act, and I'm good for you.
Well, I freaked an open. He was a feature act actually. We were playing a really nice club. I can't remember where it was at, but he was he had a strong show first show, and then I went up after him. I had a strong show. It was a great show, but you could tell this guy was out to kick my ass so he could close the room next time.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first night he did one show, and then the second night, after he had seen my show from the night before, he stepped on every premise that I did that he didn't do the night before.
Yeah, that's not right.
So, I thought I see what he's doing. However, me as being a headliner and I did a whole bunch of material he didn't hear that didn't touch any of that.
Oh, see, that's
what
awesome.
you do. You come back, man.
It frustrated the heck out of him. I was
So he was
I
expecting.
had too much material. He had good shows, and I had good shows. He just couldn't overcome me.
So he was expecting you to do your same exact show, like on the Saturday night you did the Friday night, and you just pulled out a whole new. Yeah.
Well, I watched his act, and I go, he's doing all the same premises I did.
Yeah.
But he didn't do them the first night. So, all right, well, I'll just not do those premises and do some more stuff.
Yeah.
It frustrated him.
Someone had told me that they had this conversation with the late Uncle Dal, who was just a magnificent comic, and apparently Dal had written a bunch of material that someone went on TV with. So, I mean, right, wrong, or indifferent, it's going to seem like the guy who went on TV with him, opposed to the guy who, Uncle Dal.
Oh, I didn't hear about that.
Yeah, and Uncle Dal just said, you know what? I just wrote some more. I mean, it's kind of the same thing with the well. I mean, he was a funny guy, and just because they took a handful of his jokes doesn't mean he's not capable of making even funnier jokes.
Right.
And another thing you got to look at is if you're shooting to be big time and you get big time, you got to think of all the stuff that you're going to have to come up with, because you won't be able to get by with the same act.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard about
Constant
the writing jobs where they working for a show where they have to come up with like 40 jokes a day, or they have to come up with a certain number of jokes, and so you've got to be in that mode of production. That's kind of what I'm trying to go for, is the idea. I want to hone the stuff that I have, but I want to just keep producing and producing and producing, so that never runs out.
And keep in mind, on the average, about 1 out of every 10 jokes works.
Yeah.
But if you tape recorder, like I said, I got it down about 1 out of every 6 or 7.
Look at
Yeah,
you.
So I
Yeah.
managed to shave a little bit off. But
Actually,
it
that
was through recording everything, but then going through and editing it. You know what I mean?
that actually brings me up. Someone on the quirky question of the day, Gary Osborne, he's a musician friend of mine. You probably know him. He hangs out a lot at Sacred Grounds. He actually wrote, how do you get started as a writer, writing jokes for people and whatnot? He said he'd like to know. But you actually did that, Steve. How did you get started as writing a joke writer?
Oh, I was just doing my regular comedy routine in Indianapolis, and I was one of the stronger comics in town, and there's this, he was a Bill Clinton impersonator, and he'd never done comedy before, but he looked dead on like Bill Clinton, a little younger, but he needed a joke writer, and somebody recommended me to him, and he called me, and I started writing for him. I'd never written political stuff. I try to stay away from that, but I'm writing for somebody else, and I'm writing political jokes, and I don't even know if they're funny or not. I'm faxing them to him every day, and charging $50 a page, and I'd crank out 4 pages. He kept sending me checks, and I go, well, this is kind of weird, because some of these jokes must be working. I just don't know which ones, because I'm not doing it. It's kind of a weird feeling. But that's how I got started in that, and I did that for a while. But
yeah, but I think you would have to really hone your chops at being stand-up before you could be a joke writer. But I don't know. Maybe there are joke writers out there who've never listened.
There's plenty, like Letterman and Leno, those guys that joke write. They're comics, they're writers. So yeah, there are writers that just don't do stand-up.
Oh, okay. So I always just assumed
Stand-up,
that.
you have to be a writer too.
I was going to say, I always just assumed like the writers that the Letterman and Leno had were stand-ups.
Some of them are. I would say some are. As a matter of fact, a comedian friend of mine was, but they're not all stand-ups. I mean, there's a few, but for the most part, you're going to have writers that are great comedy writers that just don't get on stage.
Yeah.
That's the only difference.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for calling in, Steve. Is there any last-minute advice you could give for people, or secrets of your trade, or anything you want to pass along to the crazy newbies out there?
Well, just keep plugging away. That's all I can say. Get as much stage time as you can and play anywhere you can, and keep writing. That's the best thing you can do.
Yeah.
Go on stage at least once a week, if not more. Try out new material each time. Do the stuff that worked the first time. Don't be afraid to do it a second, third, fourth. That's how you polish it.
Exactly.
So, as long as it works, keep it, and just add to it.
Exactly. Words of wisdom from a very wise man.
Great.
Very old man.
No, you're only as old as you feel. Oh, and you.
Yeah, well, I gotta go. I think my dentures are starting to dry out.
And I'll plug for you. You're going to be playing at the Chase Club the second Saturday in November. I got you booked as the headliner there.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, I got that down.
Yeah, like that's right.
Good thing you reminded him.
Well, I'm trying to fill up dates, and I'm putting them on a calendar, but I don't have my calendar in front of me, so I don't know exactly where I'm going, but it's all recorded.
Yeah, trust me, you'll be there in November, even if I have to drive you and put you on stage.
Yeah, okay. No problem. I'll be there. I'll be fine.
Okay, thank you so much for calling in, Steve.
All right, no problem. You have a good one, Ron. See you, Mike.
See ya.
See ya.
See both you guys.
Mike and Mike.
Both mics, yeah.
Oh, Mike and Mike. I was right both times. Cool.
Right.
2 mics or grab mics. Unbelievable.
Mine's spelled with a K.
Oh, okay.
Michael's is fancier.
Sophisticated.
I got it. See you guys, man. Have a good one.
Now, one nice thing about starting out is, and we talked a little bit about networking in the community. Do you find a lot of folks like Steve Baird who are generous with their time and their contributions and take the time to sort of guide you, mentor you?
Yeah, I definitely everyone's been really, really supportive along the way, and they're good about giving advice when you ask. They're good about not just volunteering advice. 'Cause sometimes if you don't solicit advice, it kind of seems like meddling in a way. It's like, okay, I don't need that. But everybody has been really supportive and really helpful. Just all along the way, be encouraging. Because you can see that look on someone's face when they have a bad set, and I know that feeling of going like, oh, I want to help them out. You don't want to say something patronizing. You want to say something encouraging and honest. And so everybody's been really good about that. So when I have my bad sets, they're gonna get that look like, yeah, what are you gonna do?
How about you? What do you feel about the support in the comedy world?
For the most part, it's been very supportive. Most of the comedians that I've met have been very forthcoming with advice and very encouraging. A few others, I think I had to kind of win over. Like, they weren't going to show me any respect until I earned it.
Mm-hmm.
But now that I've been consistently, getting laughs at open mics, I've won over even like those harder comedians, and everybody. Since then, everybody's been very supportive and very encouraging.
Yeah, very cool. I mean, it's always good. I mean, comedy is kind of a weird field to get into because you have to be sort of insecure, but like the spotlight all at the same time. Yeah. But it is nice when locally people have been doing it, can kind of say, hey, this was what I've seen in life, and this is my advice to you.
Mm-hmm.
The tough part is trying to get a word in edgewise with comedians. No one likes to step over what you're saying for a comedian. It's like you're fighting over the same mic and you're talking. They start talking, and then they start talking, and everybody wants to jump in ideas. And sometimes it can be really great because you can just feel like a joke developing because you have such quick wits get combined and it just becomes explosive. But then sometimes if you're trying to make a point just to talk, and everybody's jumping on comedic ideas, it takes away from the conversation. It's like, no, it's my turn to talk. I
just want to say one thing.
You need like a talking pillow or something to pass around, like some.
Something about comedians, they always like to hear themselves talk.
They do. They do.
I'm sorry, what were you saying?
I've also noticed, like the biggest complaint, especially people starting out, is gosh, I go to open mics and it's not a real audience; it's just other comics doing their stuff. And I am very guilty of this. If say I'm number 5 on the list or I'm number 10 on the list, whatever number I am on the list, I don't know what like 1 through 9 have said because I'm not listening. I'm like writing my notes. I'm in my head. I'm thinking, do I do this joke? Oh God, I don't know. Do I do that joke? And I've had people come up to me afterwards and been like, like, hey, I know you've been in comedy a while. What do you think? I'm like, I didn't hear a word you said. I was thinking about me.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
I tend to listen when I go to a show. I try to do kind of a split way where I've been a fan of comedy for so long that I watch the show as a spectator, but I also watch it for the experience to see how things are done because I feel like I understand some ideas about jokes, but I really don't know what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. So I go up there and when I watch someone perform. Especially if I know the jokes, I listen to how they structure their jokes or how the order they put the jokes and connect the jokes together and kind of feel out the crowd. I kind of watch how they're handling the crowd and what they're doing to kind of work through the joke. And so I will listen to most of the comics. Now I am before I go up there. So the comedian right before me, I don't normally hear. I kind of am watching more the crowd's reaction to know, okay, how much work am I have to put into this because if the comic before me is not doing well, then I know, okay, I'm going to either try to find a way to get their attention and reel them back in.
Uh-huh.
But, I've got so many areas to work on that I try to focus on. I was talking to Mike yesterday about this, the idea of I try not to go on stage with more than a couple ideas of what to focus on, whether it's a joke I'm going to work on, my delivery, or working with the crowd or whatever. I'm going to stay on a few things. Otherwise, I feel like I'll get flustered and kind of lose track of it.
You brought up a very good point, and that's crowd work. I think that's really something you have to learn on your feet because I know when I first started comedy, I would write and write and write and write, and I would rewrite and I would practice. But sometimes you go to, whether it be an open mic, whether it be a guest set at a real show, whether it be featuring, sometimes people don't really want to hear your stuff, and you have to play with the crowd. And I don't know how much experience you guys have had at that, but that's really scary. That's something that I don't think you can be taught, that you just have to learn to be confident and have as much sort of funny ways on stage as you do off stage. Have you, I'll start with Mike, have you had the experience of working with the crowd? And
I think honestly, crowd work is one of my biggest weaknesses. It's definitely something I've got a lot to learn, and it's something that I've actually been focusing on in the my last few weeks doing open mics, is just trying to at least ask the crowd a question, even if it's rhetorical, at least try to engage them at somewhat, try to pick out somebody in the crowd to make fun of, and I'm getting a little bit better at it, but I think I've still got a long way to go in crowd work.
It's
not
scary,
easy.
and it's hit or miss. Sometimes you can say something in your head, you're like, that's going to be hilarious, and then they get really offended. And then other times you're like, I'm probably going to offend them, and then they laugh. So it's kind of hard to find that. Do you work with the crowd?
Yeah, I would have to say that like my crowd work is my weakest point, and it's something that actually in a lot of ways terrifies me, because it's just a matter of not knowing what they're going to do. Because I kind of think of this as I go out there and this is like cooking to me, and so I'm trying to, and I've come with these recipes, but I don't know what temperature this is going to be. I don't know if this is going to be a really hot flame, or if it's going to have to be sizzled. I'm going to fan it. And so not knowing to do it. And hecklers are those little bits of grease that want to jump up and burn you whenever you're trying to get in there. And you're like, oh, it's not the baking soda. And there's just something about like that crowd that I know I'm going to have to get over, because like one of my goals, my next goal would be to be an MC, because I feel like that'd be a good next evolutionary step, as far as that way it gives me a chance to do my material and warm up the crowd and build up the crowd, because I tried doing what Mike was saying about questions, and I find that questions don't help as much, because if you depended on the answer, it throws off the progression of the joke. Now, if you're prepared for every contingency of the question,
I was going to say, actually,
it's different.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I try to just instead of, because I feel like I would be so I've done a question and then you don't get the answer you want, and you're just like, I was expecting a yes, and you gave me a no. Has there never, it's the idea is like, who likes to drink? My dad's an alcoholic. Oh, well, where do you go from there? So I'm trying to avoid questioning myself, but I know the feeling of wanting to engage an audience and wanting to kind of feel it. And so I'm still working with that and trying to maintain like eye contact and just kind of give a sense of command of the audience, because, be controlling of it and say, okay, you're going to like this.
Yeah.
I actually had a really bad experience with crowd work last night. I was doing a joke about prostitution, and I asked the audience, has anybody ever paid for sex? And of course, nobody wants to answer that question. Yes. And I pointed to the guy in the front and said, I know you're lying. You're probably paying for the girl you're with right now. I thought it was funny. She thought it was funny. He was pissed.
Oh, was he? He wasn't. He wasn't.
He didn't find it funny at all.
It's like one of the things I heard. Anthony Jeselnik, another name dropping that I'm doing, but not that this is not personal, but just hearing him in a podcast saying, every joke has a victim, and so in that case, he was a victim, so he didn't take it so well. That's
an interesting. Every joke kind of has a victim.
Yeah, I realized that because it talks about, like, he was talking about how the idea that he says these blue type of topics, and it's like, well, yeah, but every joke, and if you think about it, even. I mean, something silly as like, why did the chicken cross the road? I mean, you're still making fun of a chicken. That's why it's not that great of a joke, because it's not a great way to make fun of a chicken, but because they're delicious.
That's interesting, especially when we kind of live in such this politically correct world where you're not supposed to make fun of everyone. That's an interesting concept. I mean, I try to be self-deprecating, but you can't have self-deprecating every single joke.
Well, self-deprecating humor, that's the point I think you want to focus on, is if you're being sad on yourself in a funny way, it's great, but if you're just being sad, then no one really enjoys that, and then they kind of will feel guilty about that. But I like self-deprecating because it kind of gives you, the audience, a comfort zone to say, hey, I'll make fun of myself, so now I'm free to make fun of you, because I'm equals on this. It's like we're all a joke.
I think people are getting so sick of political correctness, and the more politically correct we get in our daily lives, the more people enjoy the edgier humor, and the more comedians are able to push the envelope.
To have a release.
Right, exactly.
To have a release. Yeah. I don't know if, in fact, I meant to bring it, but I bring like everything here. Did you guys have Judy Carter's The Comic Bible? I had a version of that. I was going to bring it.
I have the comedy Bible,
but I have another book that's equally good that I wanted to plug.
You could go ahead and plug it.
Profits off these? Like,
no, I was
It's in my trunk.
I should.
I
should get 10% for the any sales increase they get in the next 24 hours. But I read Step by Step to Stand-Up Comedy.
Oh, okay.
And my first and after my first horrible set, I went back and I read Step by Step to Stand-Up Comedy. I can't tell you who the author was. I don't remember.
That goes my question.
It's pretty easy to find, and it was probably the most useful information that I've found ever in ability to write jokes and delivery and timing, that sort of thing. It's a great book.
And do you feel like it helped you kind of hone your craft? It
definitely did. It was between my first time on stage and my second time on stage, completely different.
Okay. Yeah, one part that Judy Carter had was talking about sort of what we were talking about before, like between making fun of people and self-deprecating. And she was even talking about things like weight, whether, especially as a woman, whether like a woman thinks like she's too heavy, like if you're like under a certain dress size, don't even attempt like fat jokes, because then you're gonna insult people in the audience.
Yeah,
I'm good with fat jokes. I can do those all day.
But I mean, it does kind of bring up a certain point, but then again, you hate to like say like these are the rules and you can't censor, but I have seen where like a skinny guy will get up and start like making fun of fat people, and that goes back to what Steve Baird was saying, like you're going to turn off the audience. The audience is not going to really want to hear what you have to say if they feel like you're making fun of them personally.
Right.
It's got to be part of persona. Like that's where you have certain ones. You have like when it comes to like insult comments, like Rickles or Lampanelli or something. They also attack themselves. The same way that Rickles was so brutal, he'd still talk about like how his wife doesn't love him, or he'd do some deprecating thing about himself as well. And I've also heard stories about how he after the show he was always very apologetic to anyone and made sure that they were not actually hurt by what he said.
Oh wow!
And so because it's a joke and it's supposed to be funny, and if it does go not over the line, but if someone takes it the wrong way, it's like you don't want to hurt someone's feelings, but also you have to realize, well, it's a joke. It may not all.
Yeah.
It's not for everybody, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Some responsibility's got to be in the audience. If you're thin-skinned, you got to know that you don't sit in the front row at a comedy show. You don't go to a Lisa Lampanelli show if you're thin-skinned.
Yeah.
You got to know it's coming.
Yeah, and I've had like whole audiences where they just seem kind of sad, and Krishna had a point about don't blame the audience, and I do think that's true. But there are some audiences that you're like, did you guys just as a group decide that you were going to come to a comedy show and be sad?
Well, that actually makes sense though. If they're sad, they would go to a comedy show. Is that if you're sad, you want to be cheered up, and so I think it's a comic thing that I know I have is yourself. You're looking at yourself, look at them like yourselves, and as if they're focusing on every single thing that you're doing. But really, they're just there to laugh, and so they can just be listening, and you think, well, why they don't like me? They just haven't gotten into the joke,
Yeah, yeah. That is a good point.
But if they're sad, it makes sense to be in a comedy club. If they're already happy, you don't go to a buffet when you're full and you say, "Oh,
well, I do."
Well, I wasn't going to step on your fat joke, so
One time, actually, we keep bringing up Steve Baird. I had a gig one time in Iowa. I'm from the Midwest, and I took my family back home. I did this whole
tour. So you're dropping state names.
I am dropping state names.
I'm doing comedian names. You're like, Iowa.
Shout out to you, Corn State.
That's right.
But I featured for this really big casino in Iowa, so you know it was good.
Ah.
And it was the worst. The first night they heckled me. The second night they were all sad. And I told Steve Baird that, and he said, "Well, when you go to casinos, if you're winning money, you're not going to go to the comedy show.
Yeah.
That's
You're going to
true.
go to the comedy show if you're losing money." And so I've kind of, I mean, I'd take another casino gig, but that is something to keep in mind.
That's funny because I can just imagine that they're looking. It's like, you better be 30 grand worth of funny. I remortgaged my house just now, so I better get some chuckles.
You better be. I just ruined my
Like
kid's
the
college
same-
education funny.
The same way that you're trying to get your money's worth out of the free buffet or the drinks. Like, you're like, I just lost a bunch of money. I'm gonna drink my winnings and or losses in alcohol and food.
All this.
They're trying to get their winnings back in humor. They're like, I better be laughing for years.
Well, we just got a note on our fancy schmancy screen here. We have 3 minutes left. So, in 3 minutes, real quick, I'm going to ask you like a job interview kind of question. Where do you guys want to see yourself in 5 years in the world of comedy? I'll let Michael Fried go first. In 5 years, where do you want to see yourself?
I'd like to see myself at least as a feature in 5 years.
Okay.
At least, getting paid for my work.
Okay. How about you, Mike Morris?
5 years would be great to get being paid. And if I could, in 5 years, my ultimate dream would be a writer for a show, to have a regular steady paycheck and benefits, and then do my comedy stuff on the weekend and travel and do my own thing there. So, 'cause I like just spitballing with people, and it seems like a really fun job,
Yeah, I mean, if you could have your 8 to 5, like being somehow, some way in comedy,
especially in 5 years. That'd be great.
that would be.
Yeah, I'd have to get paid an awful lot to give up my day job.
I was going to say, you're the computer
a
guy.
given.
Now, I'll let you guys plug anything you want. Plug your upcoming shows, where they can see you. I know you've got a computer presence.
I have a website. It's freedcomedy.com, and you can follow me on Facebook at facebook.com/freedcomedy. I do not have any shows coming up, so I am available. If anybody out there wants to give me a guest spot, I am all about it.
He has both. He's got the clean material. He's got the smart material. He's got the dirty material. He's the whole package. How about you, Mike?
I don't have much to plug. I am going to be doing a roast of Kyle Roos tomorrow for his birthday, and so I'm looking forward to that. And after that, I don't have any website or anything to promote. So
Yeah, do you have a Facebook?
I have a Facebook. I am booking the face and all that jazz.
Another funny guy.
Yeah.
He works hard. He's got a good.
That's right.
We're rookies. We don't have shows.
I would like to plug Tampa Love Chicken and Waffles on Florida. That's a really good place to eat. I don't have any merit there. They want to give me a free meal. That's great, but I just like to eat there.
I think I do want to plug Smart Comedy. It's not really a show, but it is a really good networking opportunity. It's a really good
Kind of like
workshop.
a workshop, yeah.
But we do perform. I do perform with Robin and a few other comics, and it's a really funny show. Even though it's not officially a show, we talk. We give each other advice on how to improve our material. But
Yeah,
it's
it is.
free. It's funny. It's the second Friday of the month at Sacred Grounds.
Yeah, always there. Well, I think we only have 1 minute left. Next week, we're going to be talking about Christian comedy. Last week, I had Pretty Paul Parson and Anaria Wilson on talking about blue comedy, and next week, we're talking about Christian comedy. So we try to get all art forms of comedy in on the Quirky Bird Show.
I think it'd be funny to see Paul Parsons talk about Christian comedy.
I don't want to scare these people. We're going to be respectful of their comedy.
Right.
But yeah, so thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, tune in next Tuesday at 7:30 on the Quirky Bird Show. Thank you. Oh, and thank you guys for coming on.
Thanks.
Thank you for having us.
No, it's fun.